who come in so attentive and are able, in a span of really a very short period of time, take a combination of musicians that has never played together and create a concert to perform here today, and then back to normal, right? Back to school, or back to a band that isn't going to be quite like this again. So it's a very compact experience, and it's been very enjoyable so far. The first piece, Ms. Kelly Roslet, who has been the coordinator for the band, and Mr. Cliff Ruppart, who has been the co-coordinator for this event, who gave me the invitation, the opportunity to come up here, and have helped, along with several other people, to put what we have here today together. So again, I'm going to turn over the microphone with gratitude to Ms. Roslet right now.
Good afternoon. Thank you again so much for attending this performance. This all-star band will never exist after 2:30 today, and it is just amazing to see what happens in 1 week from students from 17 different schools around the area, and several different styles of band program. So the District 6 All-Star Band has been in existence for well over 40 years. Every year, students from the surrounding community come together, we perform, we rehearse on a Monday night, shred a whole lot of music, and then we perform on Sunday with a full rehearsal on on Saturday with a full rehearsal the Friday before. So these students have essentially rehearsed for 10 hours or less, and they're giving you a concert that is super high caliber, and we are so thankful to have such a great clinician as Matthew Conaway. Mr. Ruppart from Bridgman is going to give you an overview of Mr. Conaway, and then we will continue on with the program.
We were talking about having Matt Conaway a little more than a year ago, and I was immediately excited because I knew Matt in graduate school. We were both going to the American Band College. Part of the requirements of the American Band College is every day we sight read music for about an hour, and Matt and I were both in the percussion section, and we covered everything mallets, from chimes to vibes to bells, and we would take turns, and oftentimes if there was a particularly challenging one, everybody in the section kind of slowly stepped away, and we let Matt take over. He's a very excellent mallet player. And I did this for 2 years, playing with Matt. Got to know him in the percussion section. At the end of my second year in grad school, somebody stepped onto the podium and they said, "We want to give a special thank you to Matt Conaway for letting us perform so much, sight read and perform so much of his music." I did not know that he was a composer. Meanwhile, I look at him, and at this point, I'm like self-conscious, like wondering if I played his parts well enough. I have no idea. He says I did fine. I was excited to have him. But since that time, he's gone on. He's assistant professor at bands at Purdue University. He is leaving here immediately after this concert to go back for a basketball band, a televised event. So he's got to hurry back there to get there. And he continues to compose. My groups have played quite a bit of his music and enjoy it. So when we talked about having him here, it was a natural fit. I knew that he was going to work well with the groups, and as you can hear, that has already been the case. So you're going to hear more from Matt, but our next piece is something a little bit different, which I'll let Kelly talk about.
This year, we have decided to have our District 6 elected Teacher of the Year conduct one of the pieces on the All-Star Band concert. This year, that person is Joshua Doe from Niles High School. So we would like to introduce Josh to the stage.
style to the next. We went from an incredibly aggressive introduction to something just as serene and beautiful as it gets. And that's part of the fun of being a musician, is you get to play around in all of these different emotions on a regular basis. If you don't like the atmosphere of one song, wait, it changes when you play the next one. So it's just one of those beautiful things about music that makes this so much fun. And this next piece is yet another style change, but going to a more traditional style. Cyrus the Great was written by the great American march composer Carl King. Carl King spent the majority of his life and experience in Iowa. He based in Fort Dodge and directed the incredible municipal band there that now bears his name. And during his writing career, he published over 300 pieces of music. 185 of those were marches. I don't think there's a march composer in the United States who has played more than King, with the exception of John Philip Sousa. King's marches are always tuneful, tries to give as much variety to the ensemble as possible. And this particular one, with the name Cyrus the Great, you may have expected to be written for one of the line of Cyruses from Persia in the 6th and 7th century. But in fact, the Cyrus refers to his good friend in Fort Dodge, Cy Tremaine, who advertised a lot of his music for him and performed in his municipal band. King wrote many marches for his friends. And this is probably my favorite of the marches that came from that category. It's a little bit of a different march in that you hear a lot of low brass melody right out of the gates. We open in a minor key before we transition over into a more traditional major key in the trio section, the second half of the march. So this is Cyrus the Great by Carl King. And the band is going to help you through, but it's a delightful piece called Carnival in Sao Paulo. request from 4 schools that were fairly close to where I live in West Lafayette. Indiana is not a state that is particularly known for its geography. You have the dunes, which are wonderful and beautiful. Southern Indiana is gorgeous, nice rolling hills and some of the best fall foliage ever anywhere, but there's not, we don't have the Rocky Mountains. Okay, we don't have painted rocks. We don't have a large upper peninsula. We don't have any of these things. But a geographic feature that has played a lot into Indiana's history and folklore is the Wabash River. And it flows through most of the state. It actually passes right through the cities of Lafayette and West Lafayette. And for the 4 schools that came together to commission this piece, 2 of them are on one side of the river, 2 of them are on the other. They're bitter athletic rivals, but they have had an all-area music festival for over 30 years to try to shed some of those issues. And they wanted a piece that paid homage to their communities and some of the things that occurred around there. So in this piece, you'll hear a little bit of the serenity of the river. The Wabash does not have rapids. It's sedate even when it floods. It's a very calm, tranquil place. You will hear, though, something when it gets into more of a conflict. It's less about the river than about some of the events that occurred around it. Probably the most significant in how it impacted history was the Battle of Tippecanoe, which took place just a couple of miles from where I live right now in West Lafayette. It becomes later a celebration because it's celebrating all of the communities that have continued to thrive over the last couple hundred years of Indiana history along the Wabash, and to celebrate those communities who come together despite being athletic rivals, coming together to make music. And I thought that theme fits pretty well here when we're bringing in students from so many different schools to perform. If you know anything of Indiana music, you know that we have 2 songs that are strongly identified with the state. We have our state song called On the Banks of the Wabash, and the one that's probably more famous, mostly because it is performed every year prior to the Indianapolis 500 race, is Back Home Again in Indiana. And there are fragments of both of those songs tucked into the orchestration here, although there are other original themes as part of this. I thought about the weirdness of this, that I'm coming to Michigan to conduct an honor band, so I'm programming a piece about Indiana. And it's especially weird for me because I actually grew up in Michigan. I grew up in Woodhaven, just south of Detroit. So a Michigan guy taking an Indiana piece to a Michigan band, but just go with me. The piece works well with these students, and they're playing this incredibly well. And it's been so much fun to work with your students as we've gone through this. So I'll stop talking now. We'll get into our final song in the concert. But again, thank you for being here today. Please enjoy On the Banks.